All right, so I'm going to count down from 5 and then give it about 2 seconds, and then we will get started.
Sounds good.
All right, so we are recording in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ASU-GSE Summit. My name is Piyush Puri, and I lead the international wing of the strategic investments of multimedia conglomerate Times Group, called Brand Capital International. Today, we are here to talk about the outside-in perspective of a road to India. A large untapped market, coupled with growing internet reach, awareness, and the digitization of primary education, yields a promising outlook for EdTech in India. Future outlooks for digitization, user growth, and increased funding are likely to be particularly aggressive. These drivers of growth have led to a watershed moment for EdTech in India. This is indicative of the fact that education delivery landscape is set for rapid change, with online education offerings posed to disrupt the status quo by disrupting the traditional education landscape. Today, we'll have an opportunity to dive deeper into these vast prospects in the space of education technology in India, not only for homegrown companies, but also for international players looking to dip their toes in the Indian market. With us on the panel, we have industry luminaries, sector experts, and government representatives who will help us understand the outside-in perspective, and during the course of our discussion, point out elements one needs to keep in mind while considering India as a growth market. I'll begin with a quick round of introductions. I'd request the panelists if they can spend a minute each talking about their background. We'll start with you, Rajesh.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Piyush. Good morning from San Francisco. I'm Rajesh Naik. I'm Deputy Consul General from the Indian Consulate here in San Francisco. Very happy to join all the panelists here. I'm very looking forward to a very productive discussion today.
Thank you for joining us, Rajesh. Ishan, if you can go next, please.
Hi, my name is Ishan Gupta. I'm currently the Senior Director for Global Operations at Udacity, which is a lifelong learning platform, again headquartered out of Mountain View. And prior to that, I was the Managing Director for Udacity in India. Really excited to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Ishan. David, request you to go next.
Yes, I'm from Piper in San Francisco. We build the Piper computer kit. I spent about 15 years of my career at Apple and Pixar, and then about another 15 in the semiconductor industry after that. And I've been working in EdTech at Piper for about the last 3 years, focusing on impact. And in my opinion, EdTech is where the most impact can be made to help us in the future.
Thanks, Dave. And Gaurang, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Gaurang. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Indoors. At Indoors, we are building products for upskilling software developers, mainly in the fields of data science, Golang, blockchain, and all these upcoming technologies.
Thanks, Gaurang. Okay, so let's start with the basics. What makes India's EdTech opportunity exciting? We can certainly point towards the trifecta of cheap smartphones, some of the lowest data rates on the planet, and rising disposable income. But coupled with the infrastructure, what is it that is leading many international education players to think of India? Dave, would you like to throw some light on that?
I'd be glad to. Piyush, you very clearly and succinctly summarized the economic opportunity in India, where we think it's absolutely tremendous. To focus it back on impact, India, in my opinion, has the greatest opportunity to make the right decisions in terms of climate, energy, water, and the environment. Piper's products are different than many EdTech products because while we do teach children to code using single board computers, we intertwine physical computing and the inseparability of data flow and energy flow. And for addressing issues associated with climate, energy, water, and the environment, the opportunity for impact in India really dwarfs any other country. It's poised to make a lot of decisions that will be profoundly beneficial for the planet. And the more we can engage 8-year-olds in the basics of physical computing and not merely learning how to code so they can develop an app for the iOS platform, the more impact we can have. And that impact will translate into further growth and cascade the benefits we can bring.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. So Ishan, would you like to add something to that? When a large and successful US company like Udacity decides to focus its efforts on India, what were the major driving forces that led you to choose India over other markets?
Absolutely. This goes back to 2016. In fact, not today. So Udacity has been in India for a long time now. I think it was just the data that was emerging. I mean, India for Udacity was one of the largest sources of traffic. In fact, Bangalore was the number one city for Udacity in terms of visitors who were coming on a platform and exploring courses. India also had one of our largest free course user base and as well as paid users. So all those signals that show that the market is ripe for entry were there. Along with that, the large IT industry, which was absolutely ready for upskilling, was there as well. So I think with all of those signals, it just made a lot of sense to start looking at India as a place where we could scale up the business.
Right. And given all these factors, it naturally seems like India was the next big market Udacity wanted to go to, but were there other competitors also in that list?
So we opened up our office in India, and we very, very quickly opened up an office in China as well after that. We followed that up with Brazil and then Europe when it came to the consumer business.
Okay.
But India provided also a test bed for scale, right? And seeing how to optimize for some of the challenges that exist in India in the business.
Right. Okay. So my next question is to you, Rajesh, and this is more to get an insider's perspective. In 2009, India passed the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act, the RTE, and envisioning a future with 100% school enrollment for children. In a decade since, the proportion of unenrolled children has dropped to 2.8% in India, which is the lowest ever in India's history. And although this bodes well, there are concerns that still remain about things like post-primary dropout rates, equal access to quality education, affordability, outcomes. So amidst all of this, what role do you see education technology playing in bridging that gap in India?
Yeah, Piyush, EdTech will have a tremendous role in that. You rightly pointed out the Right to Education Act of 2009, where the focus was on enrollment, universal retention, and the Act has done fabulously well in achieving the primary education and to ensure that the student remain in the class. But with the new education policy that was passed a few weeks back, rather in July 2020, Cabinet has approved the new education policy where the focus is on a wider age group from age 3 to age 18, and it covers all aspects of education where the government is trying not just to get the students to the classroom, but to take the schools and education to the doorsteps where the students live, to the very individual. And in this process, education technology will have a tremendous impact, tremendous role to play. And the new education policy has a dedicated chapter on use of technology in education, and it aims to create a national education technology forum to identify, to utilize, to harmonize use of technology in our educational outreach.
Right. In fact, I remember reading somewhere, and it was very succinctly captured as to how through the new national education policy, the movement is away from chalk and talk and into the hands of the students.
Absolutely. And that we need to prepare our students for the jobs that will emerge in the future economy. In India is making leaps and bounds the digital economy. Student needs to be given a choice to what they learn, what they want to learn, how they would like to see themselves, being capable of handling the responsibilities and challenges in the new economy. It's no more a teacher-driven; it's the student-driven process. And the new educational policy would definitely looks at making the optimal use of educational technology at tech sector in realizing this goal.
Absolutely. Right. So now that we have established the scope of the market and the India tech opportunity, we've spoken a little bit about that. Why don't we talk a little more about navigating through the labyrinth of the complex market that is India? And Gaurang, as the founder of Indoors, a platform for companies to build and sustain high-performing talent, having decided on India as your second market after Singapore, what changes did you have to introduce to your product to address the India market? How capital intensive or capital light was that process? And if you can talk a little bit more about all the things that you had to keep in mind when you started thinking of India, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. So, Piyush, as someone rightly mentioned, the scale of India is tremendous, right? So, going from a market like Singapore to India, you have to scale up quite tremendously. There are millions of developers in India, if not hundreds of millions of software developers, right? So the main issue that we are looking at is going beyond your degrees and going beyond your education, really. So there are every year millions of new software developers graduate out of Indian colleges, but not all of them are actually ready for the job market, and that's where our products come in. So we have a unique model where we partner with universities and education providers, and we conduct upskilling for on the job training. So we work with employees who are already placed in companies and upskill them with the latest technologies. And we also have a model called assessment driven learning, such that we make sure that whoever goes through these courses are ready for the job when they finish the courses. So I think that's a very crucial aspect. And I think with all these new innovations coming in, new innovations like ISA, which is income share agreements, with all these innovations coming in the market, I think the Indian market is reaching a tipping point where edtech is definitely going to be the next big major force in the industry, in the economy as a whole, I would say. So just going beyond education, and RTA and all these acts are really amazing. They provide everyone with a basic layer of education. They take you to a certain level, and with ISA and all these innovations, the software developers, the employees, they can be taken to the next level, and in that way, India will be able to compete with the international market, and I think that's really exciting.
Right. Certainly. And Gaurang, just to dive a little deeper, did you have to introduce some changes to the product, to your customer value proposition when you thought of India first? And how was that whole experience of expanding into a market like India when you chose to do so?
The experience has been really great for us. The main differentiator for us is that instead of focusing on the quantum, we have to focus on the economy at scale now. So essentially, the price points had to be reduced slightly, but that is okay because we have a much larger scale. We have a much larger market to capture in India. And again, for us, although we have started with the bigger cities like Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai, Delhi, metro cities. But I think for me, the one exciting thing about India is the tier 2 cities. And these tier 2 cities are where the economy at scale lies, I think. And once we are able to tap that, I think that's going to change the whole equation for us.
Absolutely. I think in one of the recent reports by Moderator Network, they've called it the next billion people in India would all be, internet activated within the next 2 years by 2022. And most of these are in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, which is where the big opportunities lies next.
Exactly.
So Ishan, I think
COVID and this pandemic. Yeah, I think the COVID and this pandemic has accelerated the internet adoption anyway, right? Almost like all of our parents and even grandparents are on WhatsApp and all these internet applications. Quite cool what's happening.
Certainly. And that's a subject that I'm going to definitely come back to. I mean, we'd be remiss if we not talk about COVID in the time that we are, and specifically with regards to education technology. But to take that question to Ishan now, Ishan, Udacity had already established itself quite well in the US and had a successful business model operating in its home market. So can you walk us through the early years of Udacity's expansion into India and specifically talk about how you altered your customer value proposition for the Indian market? What were the hiccups that you came along the way? And from the standpoint of hiring and talking to the customer, how did you change that vis-a-vis what you were doing in the US?
Piyush, you'll have to stop me at some point if I keep on talking on that, because I lived that life for 2.5 years of building it up and seeing it firsthand. So I think there are many elements, right? Bay Area and Silicon Valley companies are very, very product driven, right? And that's great. At the same time, the markets in India require there's a lot more chaos on the ground. You just require more people. There are some fundamental differences that companies have to adapt to, and it just takes some time for companies to adapt to it, right? I think just ability to have an open mind and sort of listen to the market is important, right? I think the first and foremost challenge or opportunity that comes out, in fact, is just hiring. Hiring in India could be very tricky for someone sitting in the US. Every resume has an MBA on it. Everyone is expert at many things, and I'm saying it with all respect. I'm a product of India, so I say it with all humility. But it's tough to hire when you're sitting here, and I think that is where one has to be very conscious. I actually always encourage friends who are looking at India, people who approach me to sort of tend to overhire in the beginning because the leadership role is very important. It's also important to understand that the local India opportunities are exciting, right? I mean, the Paytms, the Flipkarts, and the Googles and Amazons in India, I mean, they're all providing top dollar salaries and taking the top tier talent left, right, and center. Plus all these, massively VC funded companies who are continuously raising large amounts, right? So when a company from US is going, I mean, it's important to understand that to get that top tier talent, you'll have to pay top dollars. I think that's and then overhire at the same time because it's a complex market. To me, that's where it all starts, right? I think the second one is really finding the right kind of functional partners, right? The accountants, the lawyers, right? The more the reference checks, the better, right? I mean, one thing I've often heard is from leaders sitting in the US is, oh, we'll tell our partners to work in India, and then they'll say yes, they're working, and then nothing happens, and then you have to fly down and some work happens, right? So I think in that sense, the ref check at times is very important to understand. And again, I'm sure everyone has networks, so just flex them when you're going there. I think finally, when it comes to launching a product, the sales cycles, the average revenue per user, all of those become different. Sales cycles become longer. Average revenue per user becomes shorter, smaller. So I think, but the volumes can become bigger. So I think it's very important to frankly talk to the customer and not over the customer, right? Understanding the local nuances. I mean, my simplest example is loans, how loans are inferred in US versus how monthly installments are inferred in India, right? It could be principally the same, but the way it has to be worded and marketed is very different. How career opportunities in technology training companies are inferred in US versus in India have to be marketed very differently. So I think all of those, marketing nuances come in. Assisted sales work very well. Localizing some of the marketing lingo, some price points. Local payment gateways are very important, who have all the cashback and wallets of India integrated. All those things I think are the first 180 days challenges that a company will see when they're entering India.
Right. And Ishan, specifically to talk about the product and keeping in mind the Indian market for a product like Udacity, did you have to introduce significant changes to the product, keeping in mind that the intent of the Indian consumer is to, let's say, find a job after a nano degree? So how did you change the proposition vis-a-vis what you had in the US?
So we were actually very fortunate. We didn't have to change the product because if you're teaching machine learning, it's the same across the world.
Right.
So we didn't have to, and it was in English, so it was actually pretty easy from a product standpoint. But we had to change the packaging of the product a little bit. In US, we had monthly subscription models. When I took over for the India business, we actually launched a bundle of 4 months and 6 months, right? Because very strong mindset of college education where you have semester system, right? People don't think of credit separately like they think in the US, right? It's a bundled education. So we launched that and suddenly we saw our numbers going up. I introduced an assisted sales teams in India. It was the first of its kind in Udacity where we had people on the chat as well as phone helping students to make the prospective students to make the right decision, right? So again, those are not, if you think of it, those are not core product changes, but those are changes of how packaging and selling was happening around it. Finally, I think it's also important to communicate all those learnings back to your headquarters, right? So if you're a leader regionally, you can do stuff, but you want to keep on educating your leadership in the headquarters about what is happening and building sponsors in the headquarters who will fly down, almost like a fly down squad, a sponsor who comes in and understands the market, right? Someone once told me that Facebook used to have a data throttling day few years back in Menlo Park, because so that to help people appreciate how internet could be slow in other parts of the world and then build products according to that, right? So my point is build that sponsorship at your headquarters so that they appreciate more challenges and then give you more resources to overcome them.
Absolutely. And I'm sure it also helps them emulate the success that you've had in the Indian market and other subsequent markets that you launched in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of international nuances are common, right? The language changes, the accent changes, but at base level, like for the developing world, many of those nuances are common. When I was building India, I had a colleague in China, I had a colleague in Brazil building their businesses, right? We would often exchange notes, and
Right.
There were a lot of similarities of building those businesses globally.
Absolutely. Great. So, Dave, I'm coming to you next. Keeping in mind these excellent insights that Gaurang and Ishan have just provided us with and their experiences, and given that Piper is a do-it-yourself computer building experience targeting the K-12 sector, it requires a physical hardware product to be sold in India. So
Yes.
how has your experience in navigating the distribution and logistics of getting the physical product to India, been different? And if you can after that talk a little bit also about your pricing strategy, that
Absolutely.
will also be great.
Yeah, this has been, the most disruptive year, say in the past 200 in terms of international supply chains. And every edtech hardware company in the world manufactures in China, typically not far from Shenzhen. We actually moved production of Piper products this year to a less sophisticated manufacturing economy that's really still developing and not yet at the level of Shenzhen. And that's California. So we actually have built-in California products now, and they're laser cut wood, which is incredibly precise. It's, alloy fasteners and laser cut wood are the technologies used in home-built aircraft. But more importantly, they can be brought to any market to manufacture extremely easily with very low capital. You don't need halves of millions or multiple millions of dollars of injection molding tooling, as well as the infrastructure to do that. A $70,000 laser cutter, which is a very powerful one, can begin manufacturing in the market immediately with a handful of components only imported from China. Taiwan and Korea can go head to head with China. So that's at the most basic level what we've done with the supply base. We partner very closely with Amazon. We sell a lot of our stuff in the US through FBA, and Amazon, of course, has a significant presence in India. And we will enter the Indian market with a number of partners, of which Amazon will be one. To get back to Ishan's point, which was, I'm sure, fantastic for Udacity and for Piper too, the beauty of India is how little you have to do to change the product. Every edtech company has massive pages of curriculum, and Piper does too, probably several hundred pages. But we also have character animations with dialogue and voiceovers. And some of the smaller markets we've gone into, like if you think about how the rhythmic phrases that the characters speak translated into German, where the syllable count went up by maybe a factor of 8, it was very challenging and even often comical. The fact that English is the language of India and the incomparable reach of the Times Group as a partner, that makes that aspect of it incredibly easy for us. And lastly, we're not burdened by any character licensing with Disney. And if you followed their recent pitfalls releasing the new Mulan, Piper's characters, by definition, a rodent and a robot, they're global. They have no cultural pitfalls. Regarding pricing, this new product, the Piper Lab controller, which is actually not released yet, you're getting a first glimpse of it right now, will be Piper's first $99 MSRP product, which we think is much more attractive in India than the discounted $249 that we currently sell for the Piper computer kit. And lastly, I think Indian children, to the point that Rajesh made, the children have to really decide what they embrace. I think they will find the invisibility feature of the Piper Lab controller to be a lot of fun. I'm just kidding about that last part.
Thanks, Dave. And I'm going to get one of those controllers for myself as well.
Oh yeah, you really did a great job building your Piper computer kit. I've seen the assembled one, and it was meticulously put together.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. So Rajesh, I'd like to come to you next. And if you can talk a little bit more about the initiatives that the government has taken in this space to, help international companies establish themselves in provide them with a soft landing in the Indian market. And I mean more specifically in education technology through subsidies, tax breaks, or programs like Make in India. If you can throw some light on that for us, please.
Certainly, Piyush. Indian market offers enormous opportunity for innovative players. Look at the consumer base in India, the student consumer base. It is 250 million students in India, which is larger than the population of entire Brazil or twice the population of the Japan. That is the base. That is the consumer market we are talking about. Today, 100% FDI is allowed in a tech sector. The fast tracking of FDI, fast tracking foreign investment clearances are happening. And then for an edtech company, you have a tax break, tax rebate given up to profit of 50 million. After that, the taxes start. And this tax rebate is given for a period of 10 years. These are all making things pretty exciting to enter Indian market. And the Indian edtech companies, I think, must have seen the reports in the media. They have recently, raised the funds worth 2 billion in a very recent phenomenon. And then COVID has accelerated the penetration of edtech products in the Indian consumer market. But I would like to highlight, what government is doing apart from giving this commercial or market-related incentives. Look at the infrastructure. What government is doing on the infrastructure on two fronts. So the first is providing the access to digital platforms. Government has taken this BharatNet project. It's connecting 1.3 billion people spread across 3.2 million square kilometers of land. We're connecting 250,000 local administrative units through this network. We are just setting up 700,000 Wi-Fi hotspots to ensure last mile connectivity. On the other hand, government is also promoting digital adoption. Data rates in the country are the lowest in the entire world. It costs about a quarter just to access 1 GB of data. And there is a tremendous change in the psychology of the people also. People are fast adopting to digital gateways, digital platforms. People are willing to spend for these things. This is what offer. People say that by 2025, Indian edtech market would be worth at least $15 billion. This is how we are going. And government, is playing a role of facilitator. And as Ishan and Gaurang and Dave has mentioned it, there are challenges in the market, there are chaos in the market, we agree, but someone who could be successful in India can be successful anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely. And those are some amazing initiatives by the government of India. Like you said, the national education policy has had a very special emphasis on education technology, and with Make in India and Startup India all coming together within a period of 5 years, India has definitely made some big strides in this space.
I can just add, I agree, Rajesh. It's in that, and again, I said to all humility, in that challenges, right? There is a massive opportunity, right? If otherwise, the opportunity wouldn't be that big, anyways. Yeah. So absolutely, 100% agreed to that statement.
EdTech is all about learning new things and adapting to new challenges. We need more and more challenges in order to be successful.
No, and it's been exciting to see last 6 months, frankly. Right. The ticket size of investments in Indian EdTech have suddenly added a zero to it. Yeah. We have seen some phenomenal exits happening, and we've seen these businesses genuinely growing, right? And they've been working hard at it for years. So very exciting to see all of that.
One other aspect I'd like to talk about from a standpoint of entering a market like India is how important is it for you to have a local partner with aligned interests and plans? And is it necessary to have someone trusted on the ground to keep you abreast of the changes in regulations, understand your business in an Indian context, and most importantly, what's your overall strategic framework for India? So Gaurang, if you can talk a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's it also depends on the product that you have as a company, right? So for a B2C product, that might not be the case. But for a B2B product, it's very important to have a local partner in India who understands the nuances and who understands the marketing and sales structures. Because as Ishan was saying, when you go to India, the sales cycle suddenly increases by 2 or 3x. The price point per item, per ticket goes down by 2x or 3x even. So it's very important to have someone who has the networks on the ground, who has feet on the ground, especially for a startup like Indoors, because it's not always possible for us to aggressively hire like companies like Udacity, right? We can't overhire in India. We have to underhire because of our size. And yeah, that's why it makes very important to have a local partner, definitely.
And Ishan, anything you'd like to add from the experience of leading,
Sure.
Udacity's charge into India, and also specifically from a standpoint of local on-ground partners that Udacity might have struck partnerships with during the early years?
Absolutely. Gaurang, just to make clear, when I said overhire, I meant just on the experience of individuals, but not larger teams for sure. But point well taken. Yeah, I think one has to alignment of incentives is critical everywhere, and it's as critical when you are entering a new market, right? And I think the two clear-cut ways, right? Again, either hire a very senior, depending on the nature of the business and complexity of the business, hire a senior country leader, GM, right, and align incentives on the growth there, or work with a company or a partner who has experience of taking companies to India with the right kind of network that is there. So, for example, brand capital or other players who would help in that, right? So I think either of the two work depending on what your product is and what are you trying to sell, right? So I think we went the team route where we established our own team there. It was also important because otherwise there's a lot of pressure on the executives in the US to keep on flying down. And that was still okay in 2018, 19. I don't think in the new world as it is emerging, that will work anyways. As far as local partners, I think, again, depending on the business, for us, our initial partners were actually our enterprise class, some of our enterprise clients. We had a partnership. We had a global partnership with Google, which came out of our relationship with them in Mountain View. We deployed a scholarship program with Google in India. That was great. Trusted partner who knew how we worked and vice versa. We worked with Tata Group to launch a scholarship there. We worked with Wipro. We already had a consumer base. So for us, those were the kind of initial partners, business partners that we worked with, which was good. It gave us a soft landing in some ways, working with very, very high quality companies, and who understood our product well and we understood their objectives well. That was our starting point.
Right. Okay, so like I said earlier, I mean, we'd be remiss if we were to not talk about the business impact of COVID-19 that is being felt around the world and specifically in EdTech space. And while the journal argument is that it has accelerated the shift to digital learning models as educational institutes remain closed in the wake of virus outbreak, what has your experience been post COVID-19? I mean, did you have any specific strategies that you employed in India specifically to offset that impact? And maybe we'd quickly go through a couple of panelists here to talk about that. Gaurang, if you want to take a shot at that first to talk about adoption strategy in India.
Definitely. So not just India, I'll also talk about Singapore and the UK now. So I think what is happening is, especially in the corporate market, some companies, as you know, a lot of companies are letting their people go. They're doing redundancies within their teams. But some companies are taking a different approach. So instead of sometimes letting their people go, if they don't have a project for those engineers, for example, they are actually sending them for some advanced trainings. So essentially, they are reskilling their own people to make them more relevant with the changing times and technologies. So they might have to let some people go, but they are also reskilling their people. I think that's also a really niche and a really nice opportunity for companies like Udacity or Endorse, where we can help them with the upskilling, and we can actually help these people retain their jobs. I think that's also a really nice goal to have as a company.
Right. And Rajesh, if you can talk about the government's role, in the time of these crises. I know there are initiatives like Diksha, a digital platform for school education launched by Government of India, which registered over 6 million views during the first 3 weeks of its launch. If you can talk about other such significant steps that the government has taken to introduce EdTech to bridge the gap, the resultant gap in education, that'd be great.
Yeah, Piyush, frankly, the government and no one expected COVID come at such a time, at the crucial, closing of educational year. in India and to last for so long, more than 6 months now. And then government, we're all expecting that it will go away and will come back to the normal way of operation, but suddenly that did not happen. Government actually teamed up with several NGOs, several like-minded people, several edtech companies to launch edtech platforms in order to continue the existing model of learning. E-Vidyalaya was one scheme, crowdsourcing of volunteer teachers was initiated. Similarly, on the skilling platform, eSkill India was launched where more than 400 courses were available online for people who want to skill and reskill themselves and prepare themselves for the future job markets. And you mentioned about Diksha, there is another platform of Swayam. These are the initiatives government has taken during this COVID period. And government has some other challenges also. In a country when we launch these edtech platforms, we have to think about the digital divide that exists in the country. We have to think about the issues of access, issues of equity, and then think of urban rural divide, and then class, gender, caste divisions, and all these things. This is probably are the consideration the government has to make, in adopting this technology or tech platforms. In total, government has to worry about a significant chunk of population who are illiterate, challenges on the illiteracy front, and also work towards illiteracy of its part of its population as well. These are the challenges, these are the drain and the bandwidth with government has to work. But I'm very sure the COVID has taught us how far we can change and how fast we can change, including government institutions, the mechanism of working and delivering growth. With online penetration currently is only at 2%, but certainly with new education policy, with government's vision of establishing this education technology forum, certainly is going to penetrate more. Government is going to give a very focused attention in this sector, and this will be handy for us in making equity, access, and outcome-oriented education across different sections of Indian population. It's going to go up, it's going to grow, sure, but we need to wait and see how exactly it will develop further.
Yep, some excellent points there about reach, equity, and quality of education being the foremost priorities for the government right now. Okay, my last question is for Dave. Dave, it is crucial to be mindful of the gaps in digital experience. And I say this especially for impressionable young minds that thrive on social learning. So how does an edtech company like Piper ensure that it's introducing the human element as well in its pedagogy and, when you're trying to reach out to a very large consumer base like India?
It's a great question. And the human element, the social emotional learning, is innately benefited by the fact that we have a build experience. Some of the students that aren't great at mathematics or don't like mathematics turn out to have amazing physical skills. And when they're handed a #1 Phillips screwdriver, often the first one they've held, their three-dimensional visualization, their spatial intelligence comes to the forefront. And students that were sidelined often become leaders. And we see this even more so in the distance learning era, where any student can hold up what they're doing and show the connection in a close-up camera to their class. That was an unexpected but powerful benefit of the majority of Piper programs shifting to distance learning. Per the point that Rajesh made, which really resonated with me, we had no idea how far and how fast we were going to have to change to adapt to COVID-19. For safety of all students, for example, the Piper computer kit is focused on sustainability, so it can be assembled and disassembled and last for dozens of cycles in a classroom. We had to work with infectious disease experts to develop sterilization protocols for the kits. There's a very inexpensive one involving clear plastic bags and sunlight and time that's completely scientifically accurate. And for districts that want to move quickly, we developed a UVC fixture where all the parts are arrayed in a clear acrylic fixture, and it can be sterilized in 5 minutes. And, if I thought I was going to be working with infectious disease experts, analyzing the transmissivity, reflectivity, and absorptivity of various types of clear acrylic, I didn't see that coming. So we've had to do amazing adaptations. But Piper's innately accessible, and there's such a balance of experiences, physical, mathematics, technological, social emotional learning, that by design, it's meant to engage all learners in this cause of empowering them and making them view technology as a tool and not a toy. It's something that you can bend to your will to create and prototype your own ideas. And not just the future of manufacturing in all countries, but the very future of our civilization depends on mastery of how we use energy. And I want to keep coming back to that theme. Climate change is incredibly equitable. It hits everybody hard.
Yes, most certainly. Some excellent insights there, Dave. Thank you so much.
Certainly.
So what we've gathered here from our panelists today is that the popularity of tech-enabled learning solutions in the Indian education system is only going to accelerate further as educational institutions, teachers, parents, and governments become increasingly willing to adopt technology in this domain. And we are likely to see heightened activity and innovation in new ventures, investments, and mergers and acquisitions, as well as expansions by international players in the tech sector in India. And current trends indicate that digital formats will be an integral part of educational institutions in post-COVID-19 world. With some meticulous planning and access to research tools, like Rajesh mentioned, digital formats can help achieve three vital aspects of education: the reach, equity, and quality. On this positive note, I'd like to thank our panelists, Rajesh Naik, Gaurang Torvekar, Ishan Gupta, and Dave Lundgren for joining us today and providing rich and varied insights on expanding your edtech business into the Indian market. And we'd also like to thank our audience for taking this time out and tuning in today. Hope you all have a good rest of the summit. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.